50 people died on the streets of the UK. No weapon was ever seen. No witness could describe the killer. No pattern made sense. Different cities, different times, different victims. The media called it chaos. The public called it terror. But UK police called it something else, a system. And once they saw the system, the hunt was over. The first death barely made the news. A man was found slumped near a bus stop just after midnight, his body still warm, his face calm, as if sleep had taken him quietly. Paramedics called it sudden collapse. No injuries, no sign of assault. Another unfortunate statistic in a city that never truly rested. Within days, another body appeared, this time beneath a pedestrian bridge. Again, no wounds, again, no struggle. The pattern was not visible yet, and that made it invisible. By the second week, whispers began. A woman was discovered on a quiet street, her handbag untouched, her phone still in her hand. CCTV cameras showed her walking normally seconds before she collapsed. She did not run, she did not fight, she simply fell. Doctors could not explain why healthy people were dying without warning. The official explanations varied. Stress, undiagnosed conditions, coincidence. The city tried to believe them, but the deaths continued. A jogger in a park at dawn, a delivery driver near a loading bay, a teenager waiting outside a closed shop. Different ages, different backgrounds, different routines. The only thing they shared was where they died. Public spaces, open streets, places meant to be safe. As the number climbed into double digits, fear replaced confusion. Night travel dropped, buses ran empty, footpaths that were once crowded after sunset fell silent. Social media gave the fear a name, the street shadow. Stories spread faster than facts. People claimed to feel watched, to sense someone walking beside them just before panic hit. None of it could be proven. None of it could be dismissed either. UK police released calm statements, urging restraint, asking the public not to speculate. Behind closed doors, they were no longer calling it coincidence. By the time the 20th victim was recorded, sleep itself became a risk. Windows stayed shut, streets emptied early, cities designed for movement began to freeze after dark. And still, no one had seen an attack. No screams, no weapons, no suspects. The killer did not leave blood or broken bodies. He left absence.
When the count reached 50, the UK Police Task Force met in silence. Not to ask who was doing this, but to ask something far more disturbing. How someone could kill so many people in public without touching them, without being seen, and without ever stopping. That was the moment the city stopped sleeping, and the investigation truly began. When the bodies reached double digits, UK police ordered full forensic reviews, not because the deaths were violent, but because they were not. There were no bruises, no cuts, no defensive marks. Clothes were intact, pockets were undisturbed. Each victim appeared to have simply collapsed mid-step. For investigators trained to read signs of struggle, the absence of struggle was the loudest clue of all. Post-mortem reports began arriving one by one, and they all said the same thing: acute respiratory failure, sudden, overwhelming, fatal within minutes. Yet lungs showed no smoke damage, no toxins usually associated with poisoning, no traceable substances in the stomach. The victims had not eaten or drunk anything unusual. The cause of death was real, but the source was missing. CCTV footage deepened the mystery. Cameras captured victims walking calmly through streets, under bridges, or past shop fronts. Then, without warning, they slowed, staggered, and fell. No one approached them. No one followed them. No vehicle stopped. The killer never appeared on screen. It was as if the air itself had turned hostile. That was when investigators asked a terrifying question. What if the weapon was invisible? Chemical analysts began testing clothing, hair, and personal items at microscopic levels. At first, nothing showed. Whatever killed these people did not want to be found. But persistence matters in CID work. On the 15th case, a technician noticed something strange, a trace so faint it was almost dismissed as contamination, a compound that evaporated almost instantly once released. The realization was chilling. The victims had not been attacked, they had been exposed. This was not a knife in the dark. This was not a predator who chased. This was someone who passed by, released something into the air, and kept walking. No contact, no confrontation, no risk. The killer did not need strength or speed, only timing. UK police now understood why there were no witnesses, because nothing looked wrong until it was too late. People do not scream when they do not know they are under attack.
The killer blended into crowds, into streets, into normality. For the first time, the task force acknowledged what they were facing: a serial killer operating in plain sight, not hiding in shadows, moving freely among everyone else. And if they were right, then the killer was still out there, walking the same streets, breathing the same air, waiting for the next moment to pass someone who would never make it home. At first glance, the deaths looked scattered beyond reason. Different cities, different times, different types of people. CID analysts pinned every case to a digital map, and the result was chaos. No straight lines, no clusters, no obvious hunting ground. To the untrained eye, the killer had no pattern. But experienced investigators know that chaos itself can be engineered. A junior analyst noticed something others had missed, not where the victims lived, not where they worked, but where they paused. Every death occurred in a place people briefly slowed down. Narrow streets, pedestrian tunnels, bus shelters, stairwells leading out of underground stations. Areas where airflow behaved differently, where air lingered instead of moving freely. CID brought in environmental specialists. Together, they recreated airflow models using weather data, street layouts, and building geometry. The results were disturbing. In each location, air circulation slowed just enough for a substance to remain suspended for several seconds, long enough to be inhaled, long enough to kill. This was not random violence. It was environmental weaponization. Investigators reviewed footage again, this time watching not the victims, but the space around them. And then they saw it, a figure walking past seconds before collapse, not running, not stopping, not even looking back, just passing through the same narrow zone. The killer did not wait for reactions. He trusted physics to finish the job. The realization changed everything. The killer wasn't chasing people. He was setting traps in open air, invisible traps, ones that vanished almost immediately. That explained why police dogs found nothing, why air tests showed no contamination, why witnesses remembered nothing unusual. CID narrowed the time frame further. The killer struck only when wind speed dropped below a certain level. Calm nights, early mornings. Weather reports became as important as CCTV footage. Investigators now knew when the killer could act. But knowing how did not mean knowing who.
The pattern revealed intelligence, patience, planning. This was someone who understood airflow, chemistry, and human movement. Someone who knew cities not as places, but as systems. CID officers shared a single concern during briefings. If this killer was as methodical as the evidence suggested, then he wasn't improvising. He was refining, learning from every death, improving efficiency. And that meant one thing. The longer he remained free, the more precise and unstoppable he would become. Once CID understood that airflow was the weapon, the investigation shifted from crime scenes to capability. This level of precision required more than intent. It required design. Engineers were brought in. Chemists were consulted. Together, they faced an unsettling conclusion. The device used to release the substance should not have existed outside a laboratory. Microscopic residue recovered from several victims' clothing pointed to a synthetic compound originally developed for experimental airflow testing. It was designed to evaporate instantly, leaving almost nothing behind. Safe in controlled conditions, lethal when misused. The compound was never approved for public deployment and had been shelved years earlier due to safety concerns. Yet here it was, killing people without a trace. CID traced the compound's origin. Only a handful of people in the UK had ever worked directly with it. Even fewer understood how to stabilize it long enough for transport while keeping it invisible in open air. This narrowed the suspect pool dramatically. The killer was not improvising. He was executing a design he already understood. Attention turned to the delivery mechanism. Experts theorized a compact dispersal device, small enough to be concealed in clothing, capable of releasing a measured dose in seconds. Not a spray, not a gas cloud, a controlled micro-release, activated only when airflow conditions were ideal. Something that could be used while walking, without stopping, without drawing attention. CID reviewed surveillance footage with new eyes. They slowed it frame by frame. They looked for subtle movements, a hand slipping into a pocket, a slight pause near a narrow passage, a repeated walking pattern. And gradually, a figure emerged, always dressed differently, always unremarkable, but moving with the same measured rhythm. The killer wasn't hiding. he was blending. Investigators also noticed restraint. The attacks were spaced carefully, never too close together, never in the same location twice. This was not panic. This was discipline. The killer wanted longevity, not chaos. He was managing risk like a professional. The discovery forced CID to confront a hard truth. This case was not about stopping violence. It was about stopping expertise. Someone had taken knowledge meant to improve public safety and turned it into a method of terror. And if that knowledge existed in one place, it could exist in others. CID accelerated their efforts. They requested historical records, old research projects, defunct firms, canceled government contracts. Somewhere in those files was a name, someone who knew this compound, someone who had reason to bring it back into the world, because no one builds a weapon like this by accident. For weeks, investigators had focused on how the killings were carried out, the airflow, the compound, the device. But CID knew that method alone never tells the full story. Serial killers choose their victims for a reason, even when that reason is hidden. So the task force began again, this time ignoring locations and studying lives. Every victim was placed into a single database. Age, occupation, history, legal records, past complaints, and public interactions were examined. At first, nothing connected them. Teachers, drivers, office workers, retirees, people who would never have crossed paths. But when analysts expanded the timeline, a pattern surfaced quietly, almost apologetically. Years earlier, all 50 victims had been linked, indirectly, to the same public inquiry. It was a transport safety investigation launched after a prototype airflow system failed during testing. The system had been designed to regulate air movement in enclosed public spaces, such as tunnels and stations. The inquiry concluded that the technology posed unacceptable risk and ordered the immediate shutdown of the private firm developing it. Careers were ended. Funding vanished. The project became a warning story in engineering circles. The victims had not been engineers. They had been regulators, consultants, reviewers, and local officials. People who signed documents, approved closures, recommended termination. Individually, none of them appeared responsible. Collectively, they ended a company. That was the moment the killings stopped being random. CID officers realized the killer wasn't targeting strangers. He was targeting decisions.
Each victim represented a signature on a report, a vote in a meeting, a recommendation that destroyed something he believed in. The killings were not impulsive acts of rage. They were delayed responses, carefully scheduled acknowledgments of blame. Investigators reviewed archived footage from the inquiry, public hearings, committee sessions, press conferences. One face appeared repeatedly in the background, quiet, observing, rarely speaking, an engineer who had once presented technical warnings that were dismissed as excessive and impractical. His name was Thomas Kerrigan. After the inquiry, Kerrigan vanished from professional records. No new employment, no public appearances, no academic publishing. It was as if he had been erased. But erased people don't disappear. They adapt. CID traced Kerrigan's last known addresses, financial records, and travel history. Everything stopped at once. No bank accounts, no phone contracts, no digital footprint. It was not escape, it was deliberate removal. The case now had direction. The killer had a grievance rooted in public failure. He believed he had warned them. He believed they ignored him. And now, one by one, he was responding. CID officers shared a single concern during the briefing. If Kerrigan believed these deaths were justified, then he wouldn't stop until the list was complete. And no one knew how long that list really was. Thomas Kerrigan did not disappear suddenly. He faded. After the inquiry shut down his firm, he withdrew from public life piece by piece. Former colleagues remembered him as precise, quiet, and uncompromising. He believed systems existed to protect people, not to satisfy committees. When his warnings were dismissed, he did not argue. He documented. When his project was terminated, he did not protest. He observed. CID reconstructed Kerrigan's life through fragments, old emails, archived presentations, footnotes in technical papers.
In every instance, the same theme emerged. He believed danger was invisible until it was too late. He believed authorities acted only after failure, never before. His work was built around preventing harm no one could see coming. After the shutdown, Kerrigan sold his flat, closed his accounts, and cut contact with almost everyone he knew. There was no evidence of mental instability, no public outbursts, no threats. He simply opted out. That decision made him harder to find than someone running. CID analysts noticed something else.
Kerrigan had not abandoned his research. He had continued it privately. Through informal networks, investigators learned he had consulted quietly for years under different names. Short contracts, cash payments, no digital trails. He stayed just inside legality, invisible but active. What he built during that time was not a bomb or a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a proof that unseen danger was still danger, proof that systems could be exploited exactly as he had warned. The killings were demonstrations. CID officers believed Kerrigan did not see himself as a murderer. He saw himself as an educator. Each death was, in his mind, a lesson delivered too late. The task force now faced a psychological reality. Kerrigan was not driven by thrill or chaos. He was driven by correction. That meant he would not act recklessly. He would not panic. He would only act when conditions were perfect. So CID changed tactics. They stopped hunting him directly. Instead, they recreated the circumstances he cared about. They studied his old presentations, his language, his priorities. CID used that belief against him. They prepared a controlled media leak, a false announcement of a new public safety review related to the same transport systems Kerrigan once designed, a review that dismissed his original concerns again, publicly, quietly, officially. CID knew Kerrigan would not ignore it, because this time the failure would be visible, and he would want to be there to witness it. The announcement was carefully worded: a public review, a technical reassessment, a quiet dismissal of old safety concerns. It appeared on official channels without emphasis, buried among routine government updates. To most people, it meant nothing. To Thomas Kerrigan, it meant everything. CID officers did not flood the area with uniforms. They did the opposite. Plain clothes, unmarked vehicles, cameras hidden in places Kerrigan would never look. They recreated the conditions of previous killings without putting the public at risk. Enclosed walkways were monitored. Airflow patterns were measured. Weather forecasts were tracked hour by hour. For days, nothing happened. Then, on the fourth evening, a man appeared near the transport hub named in the review. He arrived early. He walked slowly. He did not interact with anyone. His clothing was unremarkable, his posture relaxed, but his behavior matched the profile perfectly. He paused where airflow slowed.
He adjusted his jacket sleeve slightly. He waited for the environment to align. CID recognized him immediately. This time, the streets were not empty, but they were controlled. Officers blended into commuters. Technical teams monitored air quality in real time. When Kerrigan activated the device, the compound was detected instantly, neutralized before it could harm anyone. He was intercepted quietly. There was no chase, no resistance. When officers identified themselves, Kerrigan did not appear surprised. He looked relieved. He said he had wondered how long it would take. The device was recovered from his sleeve, compact, precise, exactly as theorized. In interview, Kerrigan spoke freely. He explained his method without pride or regret. He said the deaths were unavoidable outcomes of ignored warnings. He said people only listen after loss. He believed he had made danger visible. CID officers listened without reaction. When asked if he felt remorse, Kerrigan paused. Then he said remorse was irrelevant. Results mattered more. The interview ended not with anger, but with clarity. Kerrigan understood he had been stopped. He did not argue. He did not justify further. He simply stated that the system had finally responded. For CID, the case was solved. The killer was in custody. The method dismantled. The threat ended. But the room remained heavy. Because the most frightening part of the case was not how it ended. It was how long it took to begin. The arrest was not announced immediately. CID waited, not out of secrecy, but out of caution. They needed to be certain the system Kerrigan built was fully dismantled. Every component of the device was cataloged. Every chemical neutralized. Every note, sketch, and memory stick recovered from his temporary living spaces was examined. Only when the threat was confirmed to be over did UK police speak publicly. The response was quiet relief.
Cities did not celebrate, they exhaled. Night buses filled again, footpaths regained footsteps. People resumed routines they had abandoned without realizing how deeply fear had reshaped their lives. There were no memorials at the locations where people died, no plaques. The victims' families asked for privacy. The streets returned to being streets. In court, Kerrigan did not fight the charges. He listened as each count was read aloud. 50 names, 50 lives, 50 moments where someone had trusted the world to be safe. He did not interrupt. He did not react.
When asked if he wished to speak, he said only one sentence: that the deaths proved his warnings had been correct. The judge disagreed. The law disagreed. He was sentenced accordingly, removed from public life as completely as he had once removed himself voluntarily. CID officers reviewed the case one final time before closing the file. They did not congratulate themselves. They rarely do. Instead, they documented the failure points: how long it took to recognize a pattern, how easily invisible threats are dismissed, how systems rely too heavily on what can be seen. The lead investigator wrote the final summary personally. He noted that the killer never hid behind darkness or disguise. He hid behind normality, behind routine, behind the assumption that danger announces itself. This case proved the opposite. The streets had never been the enemy. They were the stage. As the case file was archived, one line was added at the end: not for the public, for future investigators. The most dangerous lies are not spoken, they are lived. And the most terrifying crimes are the ones that look like nothing is happening at all. With that, the investigation ended, and the city slept again.